My dad is much more of a Mark Twain fan than I am, admittedly. However, I do admire the man's work. I always felt that perhaps it just wasn't my time to read Mark Twain every time I tried. Yet, I do think that there is something really astounding about the way he has captured American storytelling. He's a great example of that. It's a very complicated thing to explain. Particularly, I always thought that that sort of what I'm going to explain to you, American storytelling, really stemmed from where I came from, which I don't actually think is true, but I think it is something we can't help but try to claim for ourselves wherever we are in America. But I do think it is a rural humor, a rural appreciation of storytelling. It is sort of, the best way I can explain it, I think, is a grandiosity in the incredibly mundane, and taking a story about really nothing at all and making it much longer and bigger and more than it ever was, making it hilarious and having it be something conversational. I don't know how storytelling or oral storytelling, joke telling played a role in your life, but I certainly feel that it's something we are losing. I guess I should try to explain myself a bit more because I don't know that people even really know what this is anymore or if it's that common. But to give you an example with my dad tells these really hilarious, amazing jokes, but you don't know that they're jokes until the end. It's really a story. It's a long form joke and you have to tell it very seriously as if it's real, and people won't even know until the end, and that could be 5 minutes, it could be 15. And I never hear them anymore. So if you have heard those or you know remotely what I'm talking about, I hope that you will comment below or message me or send me an email or whatever, just because it is so rare nowadays. I think because conversations are often interrupted. We have smartphones, and that's often why I have a hard time telling them, is because people do not pay attention to conversation generally as much as they used to, and you really have to be paying attention to the conversation for these kinds of stories, jokes, tall tales, if you will, to be appreciated well. So a while ago, my dad sent me this piece by Mark Twain called How to Tell a Story, and he's kind of talking about this phenomenon of the American storytelling, or the American humor story, I guess we should be saying, really. And I always thought it was really interesting, even though he sent this to me like over a year ago, I think, or two. But I thought about it the other day because my dad came to visit, and he was telling me these crazy Valley stories, which are the best ever. So funny, and it got me thinking about this again and what Mark Twain had to say about the American humor storytelling. So I don't think I'm breaking any rules by sharing parts of this with you. I actually looked it up, and I think it is on Gutenberg. I think you could read this right now if you wanted to. So I'll try to find it and link it if you want to read the whole thing. It's basically a short introduction about how to tell a story according to Mark Twain, and a few short stories he has written. He's kind of expanding on that idea of what makes a story good, I guess, if it's humor and if it's American. So here we go. It is the humorous story, an American development, its difference from comic and witty stories. And obviously, if you are not American, I am very curious to hear your thoughts on this because I want to know. I want to know what you think. If you think Mark Twain was right or completely wrong, let me know. I do not claim that I can tell a story as it ought to be told. I only claim to know how a story ought to be told, for I have been almost daily in the company of the most expert storytellers for many years. There are several kinds of stories, but only one difficult kind, the humorous. I will talk mainly about that one. The humorous story is American, the comic story is English, the witty story is French. The humorous story depends for its effect upon the manner of the telling, the comic story and the witty story upon the matter. The humorous story may be spun out to great length and may wander around as much as it pleases and arrive nowhere in particular. But the comic and witty stories must be brief and end with a point. The humorous story bubbles gently along, the others burst. The humorous story is strictly a work of art, high and delicate art, and only an artist can tell it. But no art is necessary in telling the comic and the witty story. Anybody can do it. The art of telling a humorous story, understand, I mean by word of mouth, not print, was created in America and has remained at home. An interesting distinction I think he makes is that the humorous story depends on the manner of the telling and that the comic and witty story depend on the matter. This is something I think is like the main point about the differences in these types of stories is that the witty and comic stories, he's saying, the un-American funny stories have to be funny for the sake of the story itself. The story itself actually has to be funny and quippy and quick. He's saying the American story doesn't actually have to be funny at all, really, but the way that you're telling it makes it downright hilarious, and that is very true. The other distinction he makes is that the humorous story can be very long, which I have also found to be true. It can be ages long before the joke is even told to you, and you will love the journey even more. Though my dad said that some people, when he would tell these sorts of jokes or be around when they were being told, some people would get mad because I guess they just don't know how to have fun. They would feel like duped somehow. But I guess some people just don't appreciate cleverness. I don't know. He also talks about it being strictly a work of art, a high and delicate art. And I do think there is something to be said about the difficulty of learning to tell a story that way, and to find all the right points at which to make the different levels and how to flip it on them at the end so that they realize it's funny and that there's a joke in there somewhere, and allowing them to have that revelation. That's a really tricky business and something people have spent their entire lives trying to perfect. But I don't know that people really do that anymore, or if it's really that common, just as conversation has changed. Though I'd be really curious to hear if you think otherwise. He also makes a distinction that these stories have to be told orally, not in print. And there is a distinction there, which is kind of my point and kind of giving me ideas for a few different thought projects I want to work on this year. That ability to tell a good story and take your time with it and have people be captivated by it as you go. That's tricky. That is a high and delicate art. So let's continue on. The humorous story is told gravely. The teller does his best to conceal the fact that he even dimly suspects that there is anything funny about it. But the teller of the comic story tells you beforehand that it is one of the funniest things he has ever heard, then tells it with eager delight, and is the first person to laugh when he gets through. And sometimes, if he has had good success, he is so glad and happy that he will repeat the nub of it, and glance around from face to face, collecting applause, and then repeat it again. It is a pathetic thing to see. Mark Twain is so harsh. I do love that about him. He is kind of a jerk in the best possible way. Very often, of course, the rambling and disjointed humorous story finishes with a nub, point, snapper, or whatever you like to call it. Then the listener must be alert, for in many cases the teller will divert attention from that nub by dropping it in a carefully casual and indifferent way with the pretense that he does not know it is a nub. That is the trickiest bit of telling these stories, and when I'm going to tell one, I really have to prepare myself mentally, because you cannot laugh, you cannot break character, you have to say it as if it is very real, way past the ending. It's not easy, you guys. He then talks about a man named Artemus Ward who used that trick a good deal. I suppose he means the trick of holding on to the fact that you've just told a joke, just pretending that you didn't get it. That when the belated audience presently caught the joke, he would look up with innocent surprise as if wondering what they had found to laugh at. I suppose you can imagine the implicit humor in that sort of thing. It's humorous in itself that they are not laughing. Am I making any sense at all? However, I do find this incredibly fascinating that someone thought about this enough that they wrote it down. That's Mark Twain for you. He then goes on to criticize quite blatantly the other types of comic stories. He says, but the teller of the comic story does not slur the nub. He shouts it at you every time. And when he prints it in England, France, Germany, and Italy, he italicizes it, puts some whooping exclamation points after it, and sometimes explains it in a parentheses. Of course, to Mark Twain, these are all incredible sins of storytelling, all of which is very depressing and makes one want to renounce joking and lead a better life. He then goes on to tell a little story in the comic way and then try to tell it again in a more roundabout way. And the last thing I want to mention that he talks about, which is the importance of an American humorous story, is the pause. The pause is an exceedingly important feature in any kind of story, and a frequently recurring feature too. It is a dainty thing and delicate, and also uncertain and treacherous, for it must be exactly the right length, no more and no less, or it fails of its purpose and makes trouble. If the pause is too short, the impressive point is past, And if too long, the audience have had time to divine that a surprise is intended, and then you can't surprise them, of course. He talks then about this one story he liked to tell a great deal, and how he tried so hard to perfect the pause in that story, and he always knew when he got it right, because there'd be someone in the audience who he describes as a woman who would just completely jump out of her shoes with a squeal of laughter, and that's how he knew he got it right at that particular telling. But of course, it's not a perfect thing. I just found this so interesting. I just love storytelling in general. I love the study of it. And I thought this was such an interesting piece by Mark Twain. I'm really grateful to my dad for sending it to me, because I would have honestly never, ever, ever have found it otherwise. And perhaps that will be the same for you. I will link it below if you want to check it out, read the full thing, read the stories he's talking about. But yeah, I just thought it was a fun little thing on humorous storytelling. Let me know if you're in America, if you agree, if you think this is a regional thing, if you think it's a rural thing, a southern thing, a Midwest thing. We can keep going. There's a lot of places in America. So let me know your thoughts on this. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Hope to talk to you in the comments, and I will see you next time. Bye, guys.